my husband installed a hidden camera to spy on me, but it exposed his affair instead. The morning I discovered the tiny lens hidden behind our bedroom mirror, my hands trembled so violently I nearly dropped my coffee mug. It was a Tuesday, 7:23 a.m. precisely. I remember because I'd been staring at the clock calculating how many minutes I had before facing another day of pretending everything was fine in my marriage. I'd noticed the mirror seemed slightly off-center for weeks, but Mark always had a reasonable explanation. "The house is settling," he'd say, or "I bumped it while cleaning." But that morning, a small red light blinked once, just once, and gave away his secret. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm 34 years old. Mark and I had been married for 8 years together for 11. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, where he'd charmed me with his quick wit and those deep green eyes that seemed to see right through to my soul. How ironic that phrase seems now, considering he'd been watching me through a camera lens for God knows how long. Our marriage had been struggling for the past 2 years. It started with small things. Forgotten anniversaries, working late without calling the way he'd turn his phone face down whenever I entered the room. I'd suggested couples therapy multiple times, but Mark always deflected. "We don't need strangers analyzing our relationship," he'd say. "We can work through this ourselves." But we weren't working through anything. We were existing in parallel lives under the same roof, two strangers who happened to share a mortgage and a last name. The discovery of the camera should have sent me into a rage. Instead, I felt oddly calm, almost relieved. Finally, I had proof that my instincts weren't wrong. Something was definitely off in our marriage. The question was, what was he looking for? I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I went to work as usual, smiled at my colleagues, attended meetings, and ate lunch with my friend Monica, all while that little red light blinked in my mind's eye. Monica noticed my distraction. "You okay, Sarah? You seem a million miles away." I stirred my salad absently. "Just thinking about some home improvements. Mark's been rearranging things lately." She raised an eyebrow. Monica had never been Mark's biggest fan. "Since when does Mark care about home decor?" "Good point," I murmured, spearing a cherry tomato with perhaps more force than necessary. That evening, I came home to find Mark already there, which was unusual. He typically didn't get home from his job at the architectural firm until after 7. He was in the kitchen cooking, another red flag. Mark hadn't cooked dinner in months. "Hey, babe," he said without looking up from the cutting board. "Thought I'd make your favorite, chicken marsala." I set my purse down carefully, acutely aware of the camera's position. Could it see into the kitchen from the bedroom? I wasn't sure of its range. "That's sweet," I said, forcing a smile. "Special occasion? Can't a man cook for his wife without ulterior motives?" He finally looked at me, and I searched his face for signs of guilt. But Mark had always been good at masks. It's what made him excellent at client presentations and terrible at emotional intimacy. During dinner, I studied him. When had the laugh lines around his eyes become so pronounced? When had that easy smile started feeling like a performance? We made small talk about work, the weather, our neighbor's new dog, anything but the electronic eye watching us from the bedroom. "I was thinking," Mark said, refilling my wine glass, "maybe we should take a vacation, just the two of us, like we used to." "Where did this come from?" I asked, genuinely surprised. He shrugged. "I know things have been tense lately. Maybe we just need to reconnect." Reconnect. As if our problems could be solved by a beach resort and couples massages. As if he wasn't spying on me in our own home. "I'll think about it," I said, taking a larger sip of wine than intended. That night, I lay in bed beside him, hyper-aware of the camera. Was it recording? Was it live streaming? I felt like an actress in my own life, unsure of how to play the role of unsuspecting wife. Mark's breathing evened out beside me, but I remained awake, staring at the ceiling, planning my next move. The following day, I called in sick to work. As soon as Mark left, I began my investigation. I needed to understand the scope of his surveillance before confronting him. Were there other cameras? What was he hoping to see? I found 2 more. One in the living room, hidden in a bookshelf, and another in my home office, tucked behind a picture frame. My skin crawled thinking about all the private moments he'd witnessed. Phone calls with my sister where I'd vented about our marriage. The nights I'd cried alone on the couch. The times I'd danced to music while cleaning, thinking I was alone. But it was what I found on his laptop that changed everything. Mark had grown careless, leaving his computer in the den instead of taking it to work. His password was still our anniversary date, a detail that struck me as either sentimental or cruel given the circumstances. I told myself I was just looking for the camera feeds, trying to understand his spy network. But once I started digging, I couldn't stop. The folders were meticulously organized because Mark was nothing if not detail-oriented. Work projects, tax documents, photos from our trips, and then buried several folders deep, Project Blue. My cursor hovered over it. Part of me wanted to close the laptop to pretend I hadn't seen it, but I'd come too far to stop now. The folder contained videos, dozens of them, all dated within the last 3 months. But they weren't recordings of me. The first video I clicked showed Mark in our bedroom, but I wasn't the woman with him. She was younger, blonde, laughing as she pulled him toward our bed. Our bed. My stomach churned as I slammed the laptop shut, unable to watch more. But I had to know. I reopened it, steeling myself. Video after video showed Mark with the same woman. Some were in our house, others in what looked like a hotel room. The timestamps revealed a pattern: Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, when he was supposedly in client meetings. When I was at work earning my share of the mortgage for the house he was defiling. Her name was Ashley. I found that out from the credit card statements I located next transactions at restaurants I'd never been to, jewelry stores, lingerie boutiques. The cliche of it all would have been laughable if it wasn't my life falling apart pixel by pixel on the screen. But here's where the story takes its strangest turn. The videos weren't from the hidden cameras. They were from Mark's phone, deliberately recorded. He'd been documenting his affair with the same meticulous attention he gave to his architectural blueprints. I sat back, trying to process this information. Why would he record his affair while simultaneously spying on me? What kind of twisted game was he playing? The answer came in an email thread I found between Mark and his divorce lawyer. Yes, he already had a divorce lawyer. The emails dated back 4 months, outlining a strategy to prove I was the unfaithful one. The cameras weren't to catch me in an affair, they were to manufacture evidence of one. If we can establish a pattern of suspicious behavior, the lawyer had written, combined with strategic editing of the footage, we can build a compelling case for infidelity. This will significantly impact the division of assets and potential alimony. My husband wasn't just cheating. He was trying to frame me for his own sins. I printed everything: the emails, the credit card statements, screenshots from the videos, tastefully cropped. I wasn't a monster. Then I called Monica. I need a lawyer, I said without preamble when she answered. The best divorce attorney you know. Finally, she breathed. What happened? I'll explain everything later. Just, can you help me? She gave me 3 names. I called the first one Diane Morrison, who came highly recommended for what Monica delicately called complex marital situations. Diane listened to my story with the kind of professional calm that suggested she'd heard worse. Can you safely stay in the house while we prepare the paperwork? I think so. He doesn't know that I know. Good. Document everything. Don't let on that you've discovered anything. And Sarah, don't delete or move those videos. We'll need them exactly where you found them for the forensic analysis. The next week was the longest of my life. I went through the motions of normalcy while building my case. Mark continued his performance of the concerned husband, suggesting dinner dates and movie nights. I accepted them all, smiled through them all, even let him hold my hand across the table at our favorite Italian place. You seem different, he said one night, studying me over his wine glass. More relaxed. Maybe the vacation idea is working already. I lied. Just thinking about getting away is helping. He smiled, that boyish grin that used to melt my heart. Now it just looked calculated. I'm glad. I want us to work, Sarah. I really do. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood gripping the sink, staring at my reflection. Who was this woman who could smile at her betrayer? Who could play this game as well as he could? Ashley made her first physical appearance in my life on a Thursday afternoon. I'd taken a half day off work, telling my boss I had a dental appointment. Instead, I parked down the street from our house and waited. She arrived at 2:17 p.m. in a red Mercedes, because of course she did. She was everything I wasn't tall, where I was petite blonde, where I was brunette, 10 years younger, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having your world pulled out from under you. She had a key. That detail hit harder than seeing her in the videos. Mark had given her a key to our home. I took photos with my phone, my hands surprisingly steady. Diane had said to document everything, and I was nothing if not thorough. I watched Ashley enter my house like she owned it, and I waited. They emerged 2 hours later. Mark walked her to her car, kissed her goodbye. A long, lingering kiss in broad daylight in front of our neighbors' houses. The arrogance of it was stunning. Or maybe he just didn't care anymore. I drove to Monica's house and finally broke down. She held me while I sobbed, ugly crying, that left her shirt soaked and my eyes swollen. I'm going to kill him, she muttered, rubbing my back. I'm going to kill him and make it look like an accident. No, I hiccuped. I have a better idea. The trap was simple, really. Mark thought he was so clever with his cameras and his documented affair, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. That Saturday, I told him I was going to a spa weekend with Monica. You were right about needing to reconnect, I said, kissing his cheek. This will give me time to think about us, about our future. His eyes lit up. That's great, babe. Take all the time you need. Of course he was happy. It meant he could have Ashley over without sneaking around. But I didn't go to a spa. I went to a hotel 20 minutes away and waited. The private investigator Diane had recommended was already in position equipped with professional cameras that would make Mark's spy equipment look like toys. Ashley arrived at 11 a.m. By 2 p.m., we had enough footage to bury Mark's case. But the universe had one more gift for me. They'd left the bedroom, probably to raid the kitchen, when Mark's laptop chimed with an email. Ashley, wearing one of my robes, the audacity, glanced at the screen. Who's Diane Morrison? She called out. Mark appeared in the doorway so fast he nearly tripped. What? This email. Someone named Diane Morrison is confirming a meeting about Project Blue. Isn't that what you call? She gestured vaguely at the bedroom. The investigator's long-range microphone picked up every word as Mark explained about the divorce plan, the cameras, the frame job. What he didn't know was that Ashley had her own recording app running on her phone. Apparently, she'd been suspicious of Mark's intentions and wanted insurance. The look on her face as she realized she was the other woman in a scheme to defraud me was almost worth the pain of the past months. Almost. You told me you were already separated, she shrieked. You said the divorce was almost final. Baby, calm down. Don't baby me. She stormed toward the bedroom, presumably to get dressed. You're exactly the kind of man my mother warned me about. Their fight escalated quickly. Ashley threw things. Mark ducked. She called him every name in the book and invented a few new ones. The investigator was practically gleeful as he documented it all. The confrontation came the following Monday. I'd given Diane the go-ahead to file the papers and have Mark served at his office. But first, I had one more scene to play. I came home that evening to find Mark pacing the living room, papers clutched in his fist. His face was red eyes wild. What is this? He demanded, shaking the divorce papers at me. I set down my purse with deliberate calm. I believe those are divorce papers, Mark. You should be familiar with them. Your lawyer drew up a similar set, didn't he? The color drained from his face. How did you... The cameras, I interrupted. Found them. Your laptop cracked your very sentimental password. Ashley met her. Well observed her. She seems lovely, by the way. Very photogenic. He sank onto the couch, the papers falling from his hands. Sarah, I can explain. No need. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. Him and Ashley in our bed, tastefully cropped but unmistakable. Your girlfriend already explained everything. Oh, didn't you know she recorded your conversation about framing me? Something about wanting insurance. Smart girl. This isn't what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like. I sat in the armchair across from him, crossing my legs. You cheated. You plotted to frame me for infidelity to protect your assets in the divorce you were planning. You violated my privacy and our trust in every possible way. I never meant... Stop! I held up a hand. I'm not interested in your explanations or apologies. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to move out tonight. You're going to accept the terms my lawyer proposes, which are more than fair, considering the evidence we have. And you're going to do it all quietly without drama. And if I don't... I smiled then, and he actually flinched. Then every partner at your firm gets a copy of the highlights reel. Your parents, who still think you're their perfect son, get to see what you've been up to. And Ashley, well, she's already talking to my investigator about a potential harassment suit. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. When did you become so calculating, strategic, capable? I stood smoothing my skirt. I've always been this way, Mark. You just never bothered to really see me. Too busy watching me through cameras to notice who I actually am. He left that night with 2 suitcases and his laptop. I changed the locks the next morning and had a security company sweep for any other cameras. They found 2 more, one in the guest bathroom and another in the garage. The violation felt fresh all over again with each discovery. The divorce proceedings were swift. Faced with the evidence, Mark's lawyer advised him to accept our terms. I kept the house. It was my grandmother's down payment that had secured it anyway. The assets were divided equitably with Mark, paying a generous alimony given his significantly higher salary and the circumstances of our split. Ashley vanished from his life as quickly as she'd entered it. According to the gossip that filtered back through mutual friends, she'd threatened him with a restraining order if he contacted her again. Apparently, being an unwitting accomplice to fraud wasn't the kind of excitement she'd been looking for. 6 months after that Tuesday morning, when a blinking red light changed my life, I stood in my bedroom now, holding a hammer. The mirror that had hidden that first camera lay on the floor, removed from the wall. Monica stood beside me. You sure about this? Absolutely. I raised the hammer and brought it down on the mirror. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, each fragment reflecting a different angle of my face. It felt like poetry. We spent the afternoon redecorating. New mirrors, new pictures, new bedding. I'd already replaced the mattress. That had been the first thing to go. But now, I was reclaiming every corner of the space. You know what the ironic thing is? I said, stepping back to admire our handiwork. If he'd just asked for a divorce, I probably would have given him one. We could have split everything, civilly stayed friends even. Monica snorted. Mark was never capable of doing anything the straightforward way. She was right. Even in ending our marriage, he'd chosen the most convoluted, hurtful path possible. But in doing so, he'd revealed not just his true character, but mine as well. I discovered I was stronger than I knew, smarter than he'd given me credit for, capable of playing the game when forced to, but wise enough to know when to stop playing. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like it could finally breathe without all those hidden eyes watching. I'd thought about selling, starting fresh somewhere new, but this was my grandmother's house. She'd raised me here after my parents died, taught me to be independent, to stand up for myself. I wasn't going to let Mark take that from me, too. My phone buzzed with a text from the dating app Monica had convinced me to join. I wasn't ready yet, not really, but I was working on it. Therapy helped, time helped. The satisfaction of knowing Mark was living in a studio apartment while paying for the house he'd defiled helped quite a bit. You going to answer that? Monica asked, peering at my phone. Maybe later. I set it aside and picked up the wine bottle. Right now, I just want to enjoy my home, my space, my life. We clinked glasses and I caught my reflection in the new mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who'd discovered that camera 6 months ago. She was older, certainly, wiser, definitely, but also freer. Mark had installed those cameras to control me, to trap me, to diminish me. Instead, they'd set me free. His affair, meant to be his escape route, had become his prison. And me? I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's simply living well surrounded by people who truly see you. No cameras required. As Monica and I settled in for our wine and movie night, I thought about sending Mark a thank you card. After all, he'd given me the greatest gift imaginable, the truth. The truth about him, about us, and, most importantly, about myself. But no, he didn't deserve even that small acknowledgement. Let him wonder the way he'd made me wonder for 2 years. Let him question whether I was happy, whether I missed him, whether I ever thought about him at all. The truth was, I did think about him. Less and less as time passed, but still occasionally. Not with anger anymore, or even sadness. Just a kind of distant pity for a man so afraid of honest conversation that he'd orchestrated an elaborate surveillance scheme instead. A man so terrified of being the bad guy that he'd tried to make me into one. But I wasn't the villain in this story, and I wasn't the victim either. I was just a woman who'd discovered her husband's cameras, and in exposing his secrets had finally seen herself clearly. And what I saw, well, that was worth more than any settlement, any house, any revenge. What I saw was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who could play the game when she had to, but knew that the real victory was in not having to play at all. The wine was good, Monica's company was better, and somewhere across town, Mark was probably watching TV in his studio apartment, alone, with his schemes and his memories. I raised my glass in a silent toast to poetic justice, then turned my attention back to the movie. My grandmother used to say that the best revenge was a life well lived. As usual, she was right, and I was just getting started.